Well, good morning, everybody. As we just stop and think about the way the pattern has evolved over the last few days here to give us the setup for the next 2 weeks, I think it'd be good to look at a map like this. What it's showing you here is the precipitation anomalies being forecast by the European ensemble for the next 15 days. The GFS looks almost identical, although as we talk about, the GFS is much drier here along the Gulf Coast. But speaking of the Gulf Coast, there are really no tropical systems to be discussing at this point, that at least we're seeing for the next 7 days coming near to the United States. So what are we talking about? Well, there's going to be a lot of thunderstorm activity through this corridor, some potentially extremely heavy rainfall, especially just here in the next few days or so in parts of Missouri. We are watching a major flooding situation unfold here in parts of Missouri. But what the other pieces of this are doing is that the large ridge suppressing the heat farther to the south is going to keep Texas very much going on their drought path, and that's going to keep a lot of the southern plains in that same trajectory. You then see the desert southwest, which has really kind of missed out on some stronger monsoonal flow this year, and we're not expecting that to continue in the next couple of weeks. There have been isolated storms. I'll show you the radar. You'll see them all blowing up here in the mountains, but to really truly define this as really strong southwestern monsoonal flow, the ridge is really in the wrong position. We see wetter conditions here in New England. We see the drier conditions throughout the Canadian prairie. But this corridor stretching from Montana all the way down here to the southeast is going to be kind of the top focus going forward. And again, the GFS ensemble has almost an identical outlook on where the heaviest precipitation is going to be. So if we look back at the last 7 days here, we can already see where those wet conditions have been. And we added quite a bit of rainfall here just in the last 48 hours or so into parts of Missouri. But if you just kind of have a look, we had the severe outbreak that happened in through here, then the second one that happened farther to the south of it, the ridge-running storms that have happened since then, isolated very heavy rainfall in parts of the southeast. And here is the effect of those storms that have rolled through this area. We've had large hail out of this that's come through parts of the northern plains, while parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas have missed out on nearly all of it and have been extremely hot and extremely dry. Now, I'm going to put this into perspective over the last 30 days since we are now in a new month. We're going to look at this map, which shows you the percent of normal precipitation. So when we look at a lot, but let's just get a better look at it here. We do know the holes that need to be filled in here. So take a look again at Texas to Louisiana. Look at this stretch from parts of south central Illinois through this part of Missouri, straight through Iowa, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. This continues to stretch into the Canadian prairie. There are pockets in Montana. Look at parts of Idaho. Look at the Pacific Northwest all the way through California. Extremely dry, missing out on a lot of summer thunderstorm activity. Now, while that's all been so dry, there has been this corridor in through here, getting into parts of Colorado, for example, out of the Four Corner states, that's been extremely wet. Major flooding in Colorado. Earlier in the month, extremely wet conditions, or earlier in the 30-day window here, extremely wet conditions in parts of Kansas into Oklahoma as well. So this is just a great map for some perspective on where we've been. We also got an update here, and I want to show you this from the Storm Prediction Center. They filled in all of the monthly data for July. So if I just show you all the reports for the month of July, this is what it looks like. So this is tornado, wind, and hail. And if you want the number, let's slide down to the bottom. There has been 6,642 reports of severe weather, and that, of course, is well above average. 5,200 reports of severe wind, 1,251 reports of hail, and 128 tornadoes. One of my favorite things about this site is you can kind of hover over and see where those events were. So these are just some of the events we reviewed a lot this particular July. Again, these wind reports just show you the effect of these major outbreaks of severe wind damage we've seen, and we do not expect this to slow down as we go into the month of August, especially in that corridor we just highlighted here. And there again is your hail report. So just look at the plains here. The upper Midwest, parts of the Ohio River Valley, seeing so much severe hail in the month of July. Now, thinking about that, I did want to take you out and show you some high-resolution satellite data here. I was just playing around with some of the data here on NASA Worldview. So we're looking at MODIS, but it's on the Aqua platform. That's the sun-synchronous one that goes through in the afternoon. And I was mainly trying to see with some high-resolution view what the wildfire situation looked like. So we can still see here, this, of course, is parts of Idaho and Montana. It does extend up into British Columbia. You can see these fires. Just to be careful here, though, this is all high thin cirrus, and these are the wildfires. So we're just trying to keep a close eye on where several of these fires continue. So let's take you over to Oregon here as well. But as I was playing around with this, I was trying to see how much snow we still had in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So I had to switch this back. Let's go back a day. There we go. In fact, let's switch over to the morning pass, which is from Terra. And yeah, you can still see some of the snow on the peaks here of the Sierra Nevada mountains. So I'm curious if anybody's out trying to ski in some of this. It's snow clear into the beginning of August here, which is quite impressive. Thinking about California, I did want to show you the latest data I've got for their reservoir conditions. And again, the vast majority of the reservoir conditions are well above their historical averages, largely thanks to last January and last March. Those 2 months and the amount of snowpack that was put into the mountains plus the heavy rains has kept these reservoirs quite full. But we do know that there are problems farther to the north. And so if I go show you the hydromet data, this is what we call the teacup diagrams. They represent the amount of water in the reservoir with a teacup. You know, for example, I can show you the Snake River Valley. You can see that most of the big reservoirs are doing okay. American Falls, though, is a little bit less than half full at this point, but most of the other reservoirs are looking good. Come over to Oregon. Let's go to Eastern Oregon as an example. Again, some of these larger reservoirs still showing up, better than 2/3 full, 3/4 full at this stage. My concern area is the farther north and west you go. So if we go pick up Yakima here, you can now start to see some of their reservoirs much lower, than we want to see, like Cleolum here at 36% full pool. But if I show you the last 60 days, this all starts to make sense, right? So just notice over the last 60 days how dry the Pacific Northwest has been. Notice how dry this part of the Texas coast getting to Louisiana has been down around El Paso, and then the lack of that strong southwestern monsoon. And then you just start to see this region here. And again, this is our region that had the extreme drought in May. It carried over into June, which is being reflected in this map. And we are curious, I'm curious, as to how this low pressure center that's here today is going to make its way over the next few days to the Great Lakes, as to how much rainfall it could possibly put down into some key areas that desperately need a lot more. Okay. Now, as the pattern is currently setting up, we have the heat to the south, and we have right here coming out of Missouri into southern Illinois. We've already got the the flood watches in place. So this has been the focus area we've been talking about as having the greatest risk of these heavy rains. And just this morning, this is where the sun's rising here in New England. You can see the large complexes of storms that are still rolling through there. But I want to show you, they're new. They showed up late last night, and they're really going to roll today following one another in this same area. Yesterday afternoon, just to kind of show you again, look at the smoke that poured through this part of the country here out of the Canadian wildfires. And again, you can see those fires from British Columbia into Montana over to Oregon we were just focusing on with the higher resolution data. But numerous very large storms that rolled through here. And on radar, let's just get an eye right here. This is the main focus for me today just because of the threat. Watching the overnight hours, here they come out of southwestern Iowa, rolling right down here through Missouri. If I could say one thing has shifted, it's been a little bit farther to the east, and we clipped more of southern Iowa with the heavy rainfall. Now that's not to ignore the big storms that came out of the Four Corner states, or the hailers that came out here in the northern plains yesterday, or the heavy rain that was in central Florida. Just to show you, this is what some of the hail looked like from the storms that came through North Dakota yesterday. But we also had some hail in the storms out of Iowa and Missouri, same thing for Colorado, and here out of Manitoba getting into Minnesota. Plus, take a look at these ones down here in southern Saskatchewan. But if we look at the forward-looking forecast here, again, heavy rain starting here, spreading into the southeast, the low that's going to pick up here and run through the northern plains. Heavy rains are expected all along this particular region. Severe weather risk today, the Storm Prediction Center increased it to a slight risk through parts of Missouri. Getting into day tomorrow, it's going to be coming out of Colorado, Nebraska, into Kansas. And as we look out there into day 3, we're going to watch parts of New England. But with that new system coming out here, the day 4 outlook has got a larger area painted in the midsection of the country for risk going into day 4. So we're going to keep an eye on that. The flow right now is setting up just like this. Here we go. This is the low we're watching. It is kind of cut off from the northern polar branch here, and you can't quite see it because I'm not high enough in the atmosphere in this animation, but there's the subtropical branch there. So we talked about why this low sits in between those two yesterday. It's going to get slowly pulled into this flow over the next few days and go in this direction, while the ridge to the south of it is what's giving us those ridge riding storms that are coming through Missouri today. All right, that's our setup. So if we just go have a look at the latest update from the European model, okay, keep your eye on these different regions we talked about, playing through the day on Wednesday. So here's our very heavy rainfall corridor setting up. We're going to watch that spread into parts of the Tennessee Valley toward the Appalachian Mountains, so watch it again here. And then the heavy rain comes out of the Ohio River Valley again to the Appalachian Mountains by Friday. East Coast is wetter on Friday, and this is the low we were just talking about showing up here on Friday. So the newest changes I could tell you is that the position of this low through Saturday, I mean, look how slow that is. This is Friday through Saturday. I'm watching right here. Friday through Saturday, coming out of Wyoming into South Dakota. This system is significantly slower than originally forecast, and it's farther to the south. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It takes 4 days to go from Wyoming to Michigan, and along the way has the potential for putting down some heavier rain. What I don't like is the downward trend we saw for North Dakota. And again, we're just making that statement because if you look back over the last 30 days, there's a big spot up here that needs this moisture to come out of this particular system. But by the time we get into Monday, Tuesday, it's rolling up here into New England, and that is a pretty large and slow-moving low-pressure system taking from Friday to Tuesday to move all the way across the country here. Now, when we look at the probability maps, they've increased the rainfall chances along this corridor. We now have a much higher probability of getting an inch of rain here. It's still wet in New England, but our drier spots still really show up in this map. So let's go show it to you. This is the latest update on the chances of getting less than a half of an inch. So you can just see down here in the south where the ridge is located, through the southwest, up the west coast in this part of the Canadian Prairie, which do show up significantly drier. On the week 2 outlook, let's go have a look at this here. Not a whole lot of change overall from the models. You still see a very similar outlook, right? We've kind of drawn this path a few times on all 3 of these images, just kind of highlighting the regions that are expected to see the wettest conditions. And that's largely thanks to this pattern. You just go through the next 10 days, we get a lot of high latitude blocking, troughing that happens over the Aleutian Islands, so the flow comes up and around and just dives here. So the support for this trough, which is bringing in cooler weather, unsettled weather, is largely thanks to the one that's over the Aleutian Islands and the big high latitude ridging that's happening here coming across the Arctic. That's what's promoting this, suppressing any large ridges. This is generally a pattern a lot of people that live in the midsection of the country like to see in agriculture this time of year because of what it does to increase those chances of rain and keeping the excessive heat away. So talking about the heat, this is today on Wednesday, the expected high temperatures. Again, very, very hot south. Still have the above average temperatures north of the heavier rainfall area, but it's not sustained. It doesn't last long through this pattern. So here's Wednesday into Thursday. Friday, the low kicks up, so just watch the cooler air come in behind this. Here it is. That's Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday. Where does the heat stay throughout much of this time period? Here in the southwest, and it builds along the west coast in this pattern. But by Monday into Tuesday, that's a lot of cool air in the midsection of the country. Now, we've been having a close look at this. In fact, let me go open the latest data here from Weather Models, one of my favorite sites. This is that 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. And you can see that it just continues to reflect that height pattern. The broader trough in this area complements the huge ridge in the Arctic. And what we have through day 5 through 10, and then out there day 10 through 15, is the front half of August showing up with cooler risks here, extremely hot south, and building heat into the western United States. That has been a pretty common signal. Now we start to look for the connections for this, and to give you a bit of a long-range outlook here, I want to show you something. It's not significant, but it's important. We see the MJO being focused back over here in phase 1 and 2. We've been looking at this recently as the blue-green map, the Hofmuller diagram, showing you that rising motion over Africa. That's what this is. And if you look historically, when you have ENSO neutral conditions, which technically we do have, that tends to favor troughing here, high latitude blocking across the Arctic, ridging along the west, but general troughing in this part of the country. So we can start to see this connection. And why I'm showing you this is, should we get this El Nino to fully just grab a hold of the reins again and go, that will really influence what this pattern is going to look like for the remainder of August. But as it stands, this is what the models are shaping up like. this is suggesting that much of what we're going to get at the front half of the month may carry into week 3 and possibly longer as well, which means drought development south, wetter conditions in the midsection of the country, especially for the next couple of weeks, but in this area. And the models have made a pretty significant downward trend in the temperature pattern. Notice we're no longer maintaining the much above average temperatures that have been forecast for August by the European model for quite some time. All right. Now I want to talk about some international weather too, and I'm going to play this for you. Let's see if it'll get going for me this time. There we go. I want you to watch over here in parts of China. Large typhoon. This is the flood maker. Then we have the one that's following it here. So you can see this is a time of year we got to keep a very close eye on the tropical activity in the Western Pacific because of the potential for these systems to roll into the North Pacific and influence that trough that's over the Aleutian Islands. They reinforce it. They tend to make it deeper. So that's why we watch these very carefully. Playing this again, watch Europe. Major storm systems rolling through Europe, a lot of severe weather throughout Europe, and it's not expected to stop anytime soon in this area. There is active convection coming off of the Sahel, which is what we typically watch for any tropical cyclone development, but we're not really seeing too much in the way of that right now. And down here, watch Australia as well. You're going to see at the very end of this a frontal boundary. See it coming in through here that's adding rainfall to Western Australia. Now, Australia's been bracing for drought given all the discussion about El Nino from me and from the Bureau of Meteorology from the world, but they've not yet fully gotten into that drought situation yet because of this this El Nino's kind of failure to launch. But if we look out here over the next 10 days, I know there's been a lot of chatter about the heat wave that's in Argentina and Chile right now, and especially into Brazil as well. Temperatures down here, remember it's winter, but we've got some temperatures here that are approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit over the next few days. Most of Australia is warmer than average. We notice Europe cooler than average, but most of Russia, take a look at the heat that's right now in parts of Russia, just very, very hot in this area. On the precipitation side of it, looking here at how stormy Europe continues to be, notice that right up here through the Ganges River Valley, over to Southeast Asia, extremely wet, but a lot of India still very dry. We've been trying to cover, what's going on right here in and around where we grow a lot of cotton and how dry it's been. Wetter in Western Australia. And even though you see some wetter conditions in parts of South America, remember it is the full dry season right now in Brazil. So don't expect precipitation here. But I did want to show you that the latest root zone soil moisture map, which again, we're not going to concern ourselves with this, but it does appear that so far through this point in winter, much of Argentina has continued to struggle with drought. We've seen from Buenos Aires over toward Cordoba near Santa Fe, this little triangle in through here has had some recovery. But northern Argentina and parts over here getting closer to the Andes Mountains still show up with significant deficits in root zone soil moisture. So we're about, like I said, 45 days away from starting to have a serious discussion every forecast about South America's upcoming ag weather. And we'll just keep an eye on these maps as we go forward. So we'll talk to you again very soon, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thanks.